a listener called Dan White got in touch with me last week to tell me about it. Well, he can tell you himself in a minute, but in the simplest terms, his daughter had some pretty serious surgery on her spine last year. Scoliosis, as you may know, is curvature of the spine, and it necessitated a new wheelchair. And Dan joins me now to take up the story. What happened next, Dan?
Well, the first thing that the surgeon said to us upon release was that it's imperative you get Emily a new chair to help strengthen the surgery, because as the surgery took place, the muscles in her back, which were used to pulling her in one direction, was still pulling. And now they're pulling against titanium rods in her spine. So we went along, we ordered the new wheelchair. Emily picked the colour, she was measured and everything like that. And everything was put in situ. And then we waited and we waited. We put after phone call in. And eventually we had a phone call one early morning from the supplier to say everything is proceeding, but there's an issue with it. The spare parts we need to finish the chair are being held up. And of course, we asked what the hold-up was, and he just said the one word, which was Brexit. And then all my realisations and everything I've been thinking about Brexit was confirmed at that point. So now, yes, actually, her back, her surgery is in danger of being undone because she's stuck in a wheelchair that's not fit for purpose. She's in constant agony purely because spares and essentials needed to fix this chair are being held up across the border by more and more red tape, as you know, James.
Well, I do and I don't. Obviously, I'm not as personally invested in it as you are, but I suppose professionally I am. And when we heard about border delays prior to Christmas, it was the case that, I mean, obviously Brexit hadn't kicked in properly prior to Christmas, but some of the bottlenecks, some of the jams were caused by, for example, there being so much unprocessed PPE blocking up the docks. I know that big container ships that were due to land at Tilbury ended up going to Rotterdam instead, because I had a contact who had 2 containers full of kit that he needed for his business that he couldn't get them from Rotterdam into the UK. So your supplier is not a Brexit expert. How can we be confident that is the reason why these parts aren't yet coming into the country?
Because when I put this out on Twitter about this thing, I was besieged by fellow parent carers, by fellow disabled members of the community. I had a wonderful W-amputee model, who's a very good friend of mine. She had blood clot surgery last year where they removed another portion of her knee, and she was urgently waiting for a prosthetic limb. It sounds ridiculous to say it, but her limb is stuck in transit at the minute. And because she can't have that limb, she's in danger of having more blood clotting on her legs. I've had people saying whole power chairs are still waiting to come into the country. These are people who need these power chairs because they cannot move without a power chair. If you've outgrown your wheelchair, you've outgrown it. People cannot sit in a wheelchair. It has to be specifically manufactured to their needs. So all the way across, disabled people's organisations have not been at the table when it's come to Brexit negotiations. That includes carers, disabled adults, everyone. No one was part of this negotiation. So it just goes to show the unravelling of it all now is costing people their health, adults and children alike.
And a complete absence of impact assessments for this specific field, which leads me to my next question, Dan, which is, is there something specific to medical supplies and medicines that has been thrown into disarray post January the 1st, or are you suffering from the broader problem, which I think the Prime Minister still chooses to describe as teething troubles? Only time will tell. Are you suffering from a broader problem that would affect all imports, or is there a specific problem for medical supplies and medicines?
There is a broader problem. I mean, for instance, there's a thing called bedrolite oil, which helps epileptic children, helps control their seizures. It's essentially a life-saving drug. And it was brought up that this wasn't part of the negotiations again. Right. So Boris and his government have had to rush through a set of urgent negotiations with the EU to allow this medication to come in. It's also the same with cancer drugs. I believe some Welsh company had to throw away hundreds of cancer drugs because they couldn't export them as well. What with everything going on. So this is a broader picture.
The company, this was reported by the Welsh director of the CBI, I think in a select committee, and he said that the company, which he didn't name, had now moved production to Dublin, which suggests that it's something rather more significant than teething troubles. Have you had any joy with government? Have you had any responses? Have you had, any interest in your plight, in Emily's plight, more pertinently?
Forgive me for the humour, but no,
Okay.
nothing at all. I think you find with parent carers and young carers even the disabled community themselves, they have very little response from government for any of the plights or issues that they come under. For instance, Justin Tomlinson, the Minister for Disabled People, has been missing in action since COVID started. And with 2 out of 3 victims of COVID suffering from a disability of some variant, this has been unprecedented humanitarian disaster, and he's nowhere to be seen. He's not engaged in conversation. Helen Watley, I engaged on national television and didn't have an answer for me. It just seems we're hit by a wall of silence.
And the question you're asking in the first instance is, can you help me get Emily's wheelchair up and running?
Yeah, can you help all my friends and my other fellow people in the community get what they need, basically just to enjoy a happy life, which should be at the centre of any government's mandate, surely, shouldn't it?